Part 1: The Threshold Guardian. Rowan felt the disturbance ripple through the forest's consciousness like a stone thrown into still water. Every tree in the whispering woods shared its awareness with her, and today they sang of an intruder, someone who had crossed the protective barriers that turned most mortals away from her domain. She emerged from the heart grove where she had been tending the starlight springs, her bare feet silent on the moss-carpeted ground. The ancient oaks whispered directions, guiding her towards the forest's eastern threshold where autumn light filtered through leaves that glowed like stained glass. The stranger stood perfectly still among the silver birch trees that marked her boundary, his head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear. Rowan studied him from the shadows, noting the careful way he held himself, the precise placement of each footstep that avoided crushing even the smallest wildflower. When she stepped into view, his attention fixed on her immediately. He was tall and powerfully built, with dark hair and eyes the color of winter skies. But it was his hands that made her breath catch. They gleamed like polished silver, clearly metallic yet somehow still moving with natural grace. "You should not be here," Rowan called out, letting her voice carry the authority of centuries of guardianship. "These woods are protected." "I know," the stranger replied, his voice deep and carefully controlled. "I felt the barriers as I crossed them, yet something called me forward." "Many things call to mortals from the forest," she said, moving closer despite her instincts. "Few of them mean well." "Perhaps," he agreed, then extended one silver hand palm up in a gesture of peace. "I am Alaric. I seek the healing spring that legend claims lies at the heart of the ancient woods." "There is no such spring," Rowan lied smoothly, though the Heartgrove's starlight pool could indeed work miracles for those pure of heart. Alaric studied her face with unsettling intensity. "You are the guardian," he said, not a question but a statement of certainty. "The trees told me you would come." Rowan's surprise must have shown because he continued. "I have been cursed for 7 years to slowly transform into living metal. In that time, I have learned to listen to voices others cannot hear. Your forest speaks more clearly than any I have encountered." The honesty in his words caught her off guard. Most intruders came with demands or threats, not quiet admissions of supernatural affliction. Against her better judgment, she found herself asking, "What did you do to earn such a curse?" "I valued pride over compassion," Alaric said simply. "A sorceress sought my help to save her dying village, and I refused because it would have meant abandoning my own plans for glory. She cursed me to slowly lose my humanity until I learned what truly mattered." "And what have you learned?" Rowan asked, drawn into the conversation despite herself. "That strength means nothing without the will to protect what is precious," he replied, glancing around the grove with obvious reverence. "That beauty should be preserved, not conquered. That some things are worth any sacrifice to defend." The sincerity in his voice resonated through the forest's consciousness, and Rowan felt the tree's initial wariness shift to something approaching curiosity. Even the most ancient oaks seemed intrigued by this metal-touched stranger who spoke of protection rather than possession. "You say you seek healing," she said carefully. "What would you do if you found it?" "I do not know," Alaric admitted. "I have wandered so long seeking a cure that I had forgotten to consider what comes after. But standing here in your forest, I begin to remember what it feels like to want a future instead of merely an end to suffering." His words stirred something in Rowan that she had thought long buried. For decades, she had been the forest's sole guardian, devoted to her duty but isolated from meaningful connection. This strange, honest man awakened a loneliness she had learned to ignore. "The healing you seek may not exist," she said finally, "but you may shelter here tonight. these woods can be dangerous after dark for those who do not know their ways. I would not wish to impose, Alaric began. You are not imposing, Rowan interrupted, surprising herself with the decision. You are being practical. The night hunters do not distinguish between cursed knights and common travellers when they hunger. As if summoned by her words, a distant howl echoed through the trees, neither wolf nor any natural creature, but something far more dangerous. Alaric's metallic fingers flexed reflexively, and Rowan caught the flash of steel at his hip. Follow me, she said, turning toward the inner paths, and step only where I step. Some flowers here bite back. Part 2, Sanctuary Among Ancient Things. The grove Rowan led him to nestled between towering evergreens whose branches wove together overhead like a living cathedral. Luminescent moss carpeted the ground, pulsing gently with soft, blue-green light that made the space feel both sacred and welcoming. You may rest here safely, she told Alaric as she gestured toward a natural seat formed by exposed tree roots. The protection spells are strongest in the old groves. Protection from what, exactly? He asked, settling carefully onto the moss with movements that spoke of long practice at controlling his supernatural strength. Night hunters are drawn to cursed magic, Rowan explained, creating a small fire with a gesture that sent green flames dancing between her fingers. They feed on supernatural energy, and you carry quite a bit of it. Will my presence put you in danger? Alaric asked immediately, starting to rise. Sit, Rowan commanded, surprised by his concern for her welfare. I have protected this forest for 40 years. A few night hunters do not frighten me. 40 years? Alaric studied her face, which appeared no older than 25. You are not entirely human. My mother was mortal, Rowan said, settling cross-legged across the fire from him. My father was a forest spirit who fell in love with her laugh. Their union gave me both human understanding and the magic needed to serve as guardian. And the loneliness of belonging fully to neither world, Alaric observed with unexpected insight. Rowan's hands stilled in the process of brewing tea from herbs that grew only in her domain. How do you know of loneliness? 7 years of wandering teaches you many things, he replied. I have been welcome nowhere long enough to call it home. People fear what they do not understand, and few understand a man slowly turning to metal. Yet you have not grown bitter, she noted, handing him a cup of tea that smelled of starlight and growing things. Bitterness is a luxury I cannot afford, Alaric said, accepting the cup with careful grace. It would only accelerate the curse's hold on my heart. They sat in comfortable silence as the forest's night sounds began around them. Rowan found herself studying the interplay of firelight and shadow across his partially transformed features. The metallic silver of his hands and forearms caught the light beautifully, and she realized that his curse, while terrible in its implications, had created a kind of otherworldly beauty. Does it hurt? She asked softly. Not physically, Alaric replied, flexing his silver fingers. But I can feel my capacity for emotion diminishing as it spreads. Fear, joy, anger, all of it becomes muted, distant. Sometimes I wonder if I will recognize love when it is lost to me entirely. You speak of love as if you have known it, Rowan observed. I remember what it felt like to love freely, he said, staring into the fire. To care without calculation, to hope without reservation. Those feelings grow fainter each year. Yet you sought healing, she pointed out. That suggests hope remains. Perhaps, Alaric agreed, or perhaps it merely suggests stubbornness. A comfortable quiet settled between them, broken only by the whisper of wind through leaves and the distant murmur of the starlight streams. Rowan felt oddly at peace with this stranger's presence, as if the forest itself approved of his being here. Tell me about the world beyond, she said eventually. "I have not left these woods in 15 years." Alaric spoke of distant cities and rolling farmlands, of people struggling and thriving in equal measure. His words painted pictures of a world both larger and smaller than Rowan had imagined, full of individual stories that mattered deeply to those living them, yet somehow less significant than the ancient rhythms of growth and decay that governed her forest. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The world of mortals?" "I miss belonging somewhere," he admitted. "But I find more peace in one night among your trees than I have in years of wandering." As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Rowan realized she did not want him to leave. The thought startled her with its intensity. She had grown accustomed to solitude, even treasured it. Yet something about Alaric's presence felt right in a way she could not explain. "The healing spring you seek," she said carefully. "What would you do if you found it?" "I would be grateful," he replied, "and I would try to prove worthy of the gift." "Worthy how?" she asked. "By using whatever time remained to me in service of something greater than my own desires," Alaric said without hesitation. "Perhaps by protecting what needs protection, as you do." The sincerity in his voice made Rowan's decision for her. "There may be something," she said quietly, "but it would require time to research, to consult with the forest's oldest spirits. If you wish to remain while I searched—" "I would be honored," Alaric said immediately. "What would you have me do in return?" "Help me protect what matters," Rowan replied, echoing his earlier words. "There are always threats to the forest's peace." Part 3, Growing Roots. The days that followed established a rhythm neither had expected. Alaric proved remarkably adept at forest work despite his supernatural strength, moving with careful precision as he helped Rowan tend the sacred groves. His metallic hands, she discovered, were sensitive to the subtle energies that flowed through root and branch, making him an unexpectedly valuable assistant in her botanical work. "The moonflowers are responding well to your touch," Rowan observed one afternoon as they worked together in a grove dedicated to rare healing plants. "They usually wither when handled by anyone but me." "Perhaps they recognize a fellow creature of transformation," Alaric suggested, his silver fingers gentle against delicate petals that glowed with their own inner light. "Perhaps," Rowan agreed, though she suspected the truth was more complex. Her magic had begun flowing differently in his presence, becoming stronger and more focused rather than the wild, chaotic force she sometimes struggled to control. Their work was interrupted by the sound of crashing brush and angry voices approaching from the forest's edge. Rowan tensed immediately. Intruders were rare, but when they came, they usually meant trouble. "Poachers," she said grimly, recognizing the distinctive sound of someone forcing their way through protective barriers. "They seek ingredients for illegal potions." "How many?" Alaric asked, his demeanor shifting to something harder and more focused. "3, perhaps 4, Rowan replied, her consciousness touching briefly on each invading mind. "They carry iron blades and protective charms." "Iron will not help them against me," Alaric said with quiet certainty. "Nor against you, I suspect." The poachers burst into the grove with the graceless violence of those who saw nature as something to be conquered rather than respected. Their leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, pointed directly at the moonflowers Rowan and Alaric had been tending. "Those'll fetch a fortune in Grimhaven," he announced to his companions. "Cut 'em all down," and he never finished the sentence. Alaric moved with inhuman speed, crossing the grove in 3 swift strides to place himself between the poachers and the precious flowers. His silver skin gleamed like armor in the filtered sunlight, and his presence radiated a danger that made hardened criminals step backward. "You will leave," he said simply. "Now." 1 man against 4, the leader sneered, though his voice carried less confidence than his words. "I like those odds." The fight, when it came, was brief and decisive. Alaric's curse-granted strength made him nearly unstoppable, while Rowan's magic entangled the invaders in vines and thorns that responded to her fury at their violation of her sanctuary. Within minutes, the poachers were fleeing back toward the forest's edge, bearing bruises and scratches, but no permanent harm. "You could have killed them," Rowan observed as they watched the intruders disappear into the distance. "Death is not justice for ignorance," Alaric replied, though she noticed new silver patches spreading across his chest where his exertion had accelerated the curse. "They were misguided, not evil." "The curse progressed because you fought," she said, reaching out instinctively to touch the new metallic areas. "A small price for protecting what you love," he said, then caught her hand against his transformed chest. "Do not mourn what I lose in service of what we preserve." The touch sent unexpected warmth through Rowan's magic, and she realized with sudden clarity that her feelings for this strange, noble man had grown far beyond simple gratitude. The thought should have frightened her. Guardians were meant to be devoted to their duty alone, but instead it felt like coming home to a truth she had always known. "Alaric," she began, then stopped, uncertain how to voice what was growing in her heart. "I know," he said softly, his silver fingers intertwining with hers. "I feel it too." Around them, the forest responded to their connection with a symphony of blooming flowers and singing birds, as if nature itself celebrated the love taking root between guardian and protector. That evening, they sat together by the starlight spring in the Heart Grove, sharing their deepest fears and hopes as the liquid light danced around them. Alaric spoke of his terror that the curse would claim his capacity for love before he could fully understand what he felt for her. Rowan confessed her fear that caring for someone beyond the forest would compromise her ability to serve as its guardian. "What if love makes us stronger rather than weaker?" Alaric asked as they watched stars reflect in the magical waters. "What if protecting each other enhances our ability to protect everything else we hold dear?" "I have never considered such a possibility," Rowan admitted, leaning against his shoulder and feeling the fascinating interplay of warm flesh and cool metal beneath her cheek. "Then perhaps it is time to consider new possibilities," he suggested, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of her head. Part 4, The Price of Truth. As autumn deepened toward winter, Rowan spent increasingly long hours communing with the forest's most ancient spirits, seeking knowledge that might break Alaric's curse. The eldest consciousness, dwelling in the heart of the primordial woods, was older than memory, its awareness stretching back to the first days when magic touched the world. What she learned filled her with both hope and dread. The curse could indeed be broken, but only through a binding of life forces that would transform both the curse-bearer and the one who loved him. The magic required absolute trust and willing sacrifice, with consequences that could not be fully predicted. "There is a way," she told Alaric one evening as they walked the moonlit paths between sacred groves, "but the cost may be higher than either of us can bear." Alaric stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of careful attention. "Tell me everything." "I would need to interweave my life force with yours, using my connection to the forest's deepest magic to transform the curse from within," Rowan explained, her voice steady despite the fear thrumming through her veins. "But such a binding is permanent and unpredictable. I might lose my role as guardian, my magical abilities, even my life." "Then we will not attempt it," Alaric said immediately, his voice firm with resolve. "That choice is not yours alone to make," Rowan replied, though her heart ached at his immediate refusal to let her risk herself for his sake. "It is when the potential cost is everything you are," he insisted, reaching out to cup her face with hands that were now more silver than flesh. "I will not have your sacrifice on my conscience, Rowan. I would rather live with this curse forever than destroy the woman I love in the breaking of it." "You love me," she repeated, the words hanging between them like flower petals on still air. "Completely," Alaric confirmed without hesitation, "which is why I will leave before my presence here makes it impossible for you to choose duty over sentiment." "And if I love you too?" Rowan asked, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his transformed body. "If I choose to make this sacrifice willingly because a life without you is no life at all, then I will spend whatever humanity I have left trying to convince you otherwise," he said, though his metallic hands trembled as they framed her face. "The forest spirits say there might be another way," Rowan continued, watching hope and fear war in his expression. "Instead of breaking the curse, what if we transformed it, changed its nature rather than its existence?" "How?" Alaric asked, though she could see he was afraid to hope. "I do not know," she admitted. "The Ancient Ones speak in riddles and metaphors. They say the greatest magic comes not from fighting what is, but from embracing what could be." "And you think that applies to my curse?" he asked. "I think it applies to us," Rowan said, rising on her toes to press her forehead against his. "To what we could become together if we stop fighting the changes and start shaping them instead." That night they held each other close beneath the stars, both afraid of what the future might bring, but no longer willing to face it alone. The curse continued its relentless progress, claiming more of Alaric's chest and beginning to affect the rhythm of his heart. But his capacity for love seemed to grow stronger, rather than weaker in Rowan's presence. "Promise me something," he whispered as dawn approached. "Whatever we attempt, whatever the cost, promise you will not sacrifice your essential self for my sake." "I cannot promise that," Rowan replied honestly. "But I can promise that any choice I make will be mine to make, not yours to forbid. And I can promise that any sacrifice you make will be treasured and honored for as long as consciousness remains in me," Alaric said, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted of starlight and forever. Part 5. The Weaving of Magic and Metal. Winter's first snow began falling on the night Rowan made her choice. She had spent days in meditation with the forest's eldest spirits, learning the intricacies of transformation magic and the delicate art of weaving life forces together without destroying either in the process. The curse had progressed to the point where Alaric's heartbeat carried the metallic rhythm of clockwork rather than flesh, and his emotional responses required increasingly greater effort to maintain. Time was running short. "Are you certain?" he asked as they stood together in the Heart Grove, surrounded by the 7 ancient oaks that had witnessed the forest's birth. "Once we begin this working, there will be no turning back." "I have never been more certain of anything," Rowan replied, though her hands shook as she prepared the ritual space with flowers and stones arranged in patterns older than recorded history. "What will you do?" Alaric asked, watching her weave starlight from the sacred spring into visible threads that sparkled between her fingers. "Not break your curse," she said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "Transform it. Change its purpose from destruction to enhancement, its nature from consuming to creating." "And the cost to you?" he asked. "Unknown," Rowan admitted. "But the forest spirits believe that love can reshape any magic, given sufficient will and trust." As midnight approached, when the barriers between worlds grew thin and transformation became possible, Rowan began the most complex magical working of her life. Instead of fighting the curse's hold on Alaric, she wove her own life force through it, not to destroy but to redirect its power. The magic that flowed between them was unlike anything either had experienced. Rowan felt her consciousness expand beyond her physical form, touching every corner of Alaric's being while he opened himself completely to her influence. The curse fought against her intrusion at first, then gradually began to respond to her guidance as she showed it new patterns to follow. Rather than consuming Alaric's humanity, the transformed curse began to enhance it. The silver spreading through his body became a conduit for the forest's own magic, connecting him to the natural world in ways that complemented rather than replaced his human nature. Where before the metal had been cold and lifeless, now it pulsed with warm energy that echoed Rowan's own heartbeat. The transformation was intense and exhausting, requiring absolute trust from both of them as their essences intertwined on the deepest possible level. When it was complete, they lay together on the moss-covered ground, breathing heavily and marveling at what they had accomplished. "How do you feel?" Rowan asked when she could finally speak again. "Like myself," Alaric said wonderingly, sitting up to examine his transformed hands. "But more than myself. I can feel your magic within me and through it, the forest's own consciousness." The silver remained, covering nearly half his body in beautiful metallic patterns, but now it gleamed with inner warmth and seemed to pulse with the rhythm of growing things. More importantly, his emotional capacity had not only returned but intensified through their magical bond. "And you?" he asked, studying her face with concern. "What has this cost you?" "Nothing," Rowan realized with growing amazement. "It has given me more than I lost." Her connection to the forest had not weakened but evolved, extending through their bond to encompass areas far beyond her previous boundaries. Through Alaric, she could sense and influence the natural world in ways she had never imagined possible. "We are bound now," she explained, helping him to his feet. "Your curse has become a bridge between the human world and the forest's magic. Through you, I can protect far more than I ever could alone. And through you, I finally understand what it means to belong somewhere," Alaric replied, pulling her into his arms. "To be part of something greater than myself." Part 6. New Growth. Spring arrived early in the Whispering Woods, as if the forest itself celebrated the new harmony Rowan and Alaric had created through their bond. The transformation had changed both of them in ways they were still discovering. Alaric's connection to the natural world allowed him to communicate with plants and animals in ways that complemented Rowan's more intuitive magic, while her expanded range meant the forest's protection now covered nearly twice its previous territory. "The merchant caravans are requesting formal safe passage agreements," Alaric reported as he returned from one of his regular diplomatic missions to the surrounding settlements. "They understand now that cooperation with the forest benefits everyone, because they trust you to speak for both the woodland and their interests," Rowan observed, watching him move through the grove with the easy grace of someone who belonged completely to this world. Their daily routine had evolved to take advantage of their complementary abilities. Mornings were spent tending the expanded sacred groves together, with Alaric's methodical approach grounding Rowan's sometimes chaotic magical instincts, while her intuitive connection guided his more systematic methods. Afternoons often found them exploring the boundaries of their new abilities, discovering ways their combined powers could nurture and protect the growing wildlands. "The Children's Nature Study Group wants to establish a regular program," he continued, consulting notes written in his careful handwriting. "And 3 more villages have agreed to adopt sustainable forestry practices in exchange for protection from the night hunters." "You enjoy this work," Rowan said, settling beside him on their favorite moss-covered log. "I enjoy building connections," Alaric agreed, wrapping his arm around her. The silver tracery across his skin caught the spring sunlight, creating patterns that shifted and flowed like living art. Creating understanding between worlds that have been separate for too long. "And I enjoy watching you do it," she replied, leaning into his warmth. "You have given the forest a voice in the human world that it never had before." Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day until they could sense each other's thoughts and emotions across great distances. When Alaric travelled to negotiate with distant communities, Rowan could feel his presence like a warm current in her consciousness. When she worked deep magic in the sacred groves, he experienced the forest's joy and contentment as if it were his own. "Sometimes I wonder what we might have been separately," Rowan mused as they watched new growth sprouting in areas that had been barren for decades. "Less than we are together," Alaric said with certainty. "Your magic needed grounding and my curse needed transformation. Apart, we were both incomplete." "And now?" she asked. "Now we are something entirely new," he replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. "Something the world has never seen before." As evening approached, they walked the expanded boundaries of their domain, greeting familiar spirits and discovering new wonders that had sprung up in the rich soil of their combined magic. The forest had become a bridge between the human and natural worlds, offering sanctuary to both while teaching the value of cooperation over conflict. "The Summer Council wants to establish a permanent embassy here," Alaric mentioned as they settled by their favourite starlight pool. "A place where humans and forest spirits can meet safely to discuss matters of mutual concern." "What did you tell them?" Rowan asked, though she already knew from the contentment flowing through their bond. "That we would consider it," he replied with a smile. "After we consult with our most important advisors." He gestured toward the ancient oaks surrounding them, whose whispered conversations had become audible to both of them through their shared connection to the forest's consciousness. "And what do our advisors think?" she asked, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves above them. "They think change is the only constant in nature," Alaric translated, his fluency in tree speech one of many gifts their bond had given him, and that some changes create growth rather than loss. "Wise counsel," Rowan agreed, watching the liquid starlight dance in gentle spirals around their reflections. Part 7, The Song of Forever. 1 year after their transformation, Rowan and Alaric stood together at the heart of what had once been a single grove, but now encompassed an entire network of protected woodlands. Their love had literally grown the forest, creating corridors of wilderness that connected previously isolated natural areas and allowed wildlife populations to flourish. "The delegation from the Eastern Kingdoms arrives tomorrow," Alaric reported, though his tone carried satisfaction rather than stress. "They want to learn how we achieved such harmony between human needs and natural protection." "Because other forests are beginning to awaken," Rowan said, her expanded consciousness touching on distant groves where new guardians were discovering their own connections to the natural world. "Our bond has created ripples far beyond these woods." "Do you mind sharing what we have learned?" he asked, settling beside her on the moss-covered stone that had become their traditional meeting place. "Knowledge shared multiplies rather than diminishes," she replied, echoing one of the forest spirit's favourite sayings. "Besides, the world needs more bridges between human and natural communities." Their transformation had inspired others in ways they were still discovering. Reports came regularly of new partnerships forming between human settlements and their local forests, of guardians awakening to powers they had never suspected, of ancient magic stirring in response to their example. "The summer gathering will be our largest yet," Alaric continued, consulting his ever-present notes. "Representatives from 12 kingdoms, plus envoys from the deep forests and mountain groves." "Nervous?" Rowan asked, though she could feel his excitement through their bond. "Eager," he corrected. Each new alliance means more protection for places that cannot protect themselves. As twilight settled over their expanded domain, they walked together through groves that hummed with contentment, and paths where flowers bloomed year-round in response to their combined magic. The silver patterns in Alaric's skin had grown more elaborate over the months, creating beautiful traceries that seemed to map the forest's energy flows across his body. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they paused beside a waterfall that flowed upward in defiance of natural law. "Binding yourself to someone whose nature is so changed from what you expected to love." "You are exactly what I expected to love," Rowan replied, tracing the silver patterns on his chest with gentle fingers. "I just did not know I was expecting it until you arrived." "The forest knew," Alaric observed, catching her hand and pressing it flat against his heart. "It guided me here with perfect timing." "Ancient magic has its own wisdom," she agreed, feeling the steady rhythm of his pulse beneath her palm. No longer entirely human, but warm and alive and utterly beloved. Above them, the canopy whispered its eternal song of growth and change, while around them the luminescent moss pulsed with the light of stars that existed only in the space between worlds. They had found something neither had dared dream possible. A love that enhanced rather than diminished their individual purposes. A bond that made them more than they could ever have been alone. "What shall we do tomorrow?" Rowan asked as they settled together beneath the singing trees. "Tomorrow we will tend our gardens and welcome new friends and continue building bridges between worlds," Alaric replied, his arms encircling her with the perfect security of someone who had finally found home. "Tonight, we simply exist in this moment of perfect contentment." In the growing darkness of their enchanted forest, surrounded by magic they had woven together from curse and blessing, duty and love, Rowan and Alaric held each other close and listened to the ancient trees sing their eternal song of growth, transformation, and the endless possibility that bloomed when two hearts chose to grow in the same direction. Their story had become part of the forest's own legend, whispered by wind through leaves and carried by streams to distant groves where other hearts were learning that the most powerful magic was not found in ancient spells or mystical artifacts, but in the simple, revolutionary act of choosing love over fear, growth over stagnation, and together over alone. The whispering woods sang them to sleep with lullabies older than memory, and their dreams were filled with visions of forests yet to be awakened, guardians yet to discover their calling, and love stories yet to be written in the space between human hearts and the wild, patient wisdom of the natural world.